So Andrew, it is 1:07. We still do not have physical quorum.
Rebecca just sent me a message. She said she's almost here.
Woohoo! Okay. We're about to have physical quorum.
Okay, so we have 4 people there.
4 so far, but Rebecca's on her way.
Okay, Jennifer Smith should be on her way too. She said about 1:15.
We're upstairs, so she doesn't take the time. Third floor.
Who's doing the presentation today?
I'm going to go through the slides. The ones that were shared were not fully updated. I was planning on updating those this morning, but I went ahead and kept it mostly the same from last time, but it's kind of reviewing everything we did last time and just applying a determination, hopefully, on whether or not the task force decides which permit type for each one.
Right. And today's anybody on the minor major.
Jennifer Smith is online.
Yeah, on the. Yeah, one second. Cool. It actually might be a good thing to go for the fair, the adaptation thing, because a lot of what we're looking at is trying to get on site at the
Yes,
fairground.
that'll be great.
And, hopefully some roofs that don't leak or have branches to them. Good, yeah, we would like that. They were requested to the state, so we'll see. Super how that is.
All right, so while we're waiting for Rebecca, I'll be right back.
Will we be complete when Jen gets here?
Jen and Rebecca's on her way up.
Oh,
Is this I just realized the minutes that I printed out have the highlights all over them.
there, I did that for just my own personal.
Oh,
they
okay.
need to be approved.
Okay.
Sorry, I can.
And then,
I just want to make sure that this was the most recent version.
Yeah, and then too, when I was going through, I had to go off the video, and I'm not familiar with everybody. So there were certain people that if I highlighted, I wasn't positive if it was your voice or not, more
Okay.
or less.
And then there's one, yeah, you didn't have a name
Because I didn't hear
for the motion. Yeah.
somebody, state their name, so I was trying to go off voices.
Okay.
It's hard to see too, so I couldn't really tell if there was an alpha meeting.
Right, right.
What do you know?
Well, thank you for the email.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right, Rebecca is here at 1:11. We'll go ahead and get our meeting started. I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. So it looks like we have a physical quorum. There's a new Zoom setting, so I cannot see the conference room. I was going through all the different settings. IT set this up as a webinar, and that's most likely why. But with that said, it is Tuesday, June 20th. And the main topic of discussion for this meeting is a review of permit types required for license types allowed in the county of Lake. And moving on, our agenda will begin with the roll call of task force members. Then we have 2 sets of minutes to review and consider. And then again, I think actually this agenda more closely reflects the last meeting. I'm going to go ahead and open up the PDF and reference that. Yeah, it looks a little different than this PowerPoint slide. Okay, so this is more or less what we're looking at for an agenda. Our welcome, our roll call of task force members, considerations of minutes from the May 8th, 2023 task force meeting, consideration of minutes from June 12th, and consideration of permit types. So because it was on the agenda, we can make a motion for all of these. So similar to the last meeting where we went through all the different license types and reviewed what base zoning districts we would allow them in. Now that we've gotten through that phase, we'll look at which permit types for those license types. So with that said, I'll go back to the PowerPoint slide.
Andrew, this is Sarah. I believe
Sure.
where we left off was that we wanted to go back and revisit the zoning around retail and on-site consumption, because we did not finish that last week.
Right. My understanding at the conclusion for that is that, you know, with a retail license, it is an allowable use. So when we really get into the specifics of consumption and lounges, that will be in performance and development standards.
I think you are correct. There was some confusion amongst the task force members and the public. So we were going to start this meeting, I believe, by just talking through that, because we skipped it over since it was something the task force had already voted on. So if it wants to be revisited, I'm prepared to do that.
And I would, since you brought it up, this is convenient, but I would like to point out that a member of the public has also asked me to raise this as a topic for revisiting. And if it is as simple as a clarification, great. If it's actually something that the task force needs to discuss some more, I'm in representation of this individual here to also ask for that. But nevertheless, I don't know that it needs that. I'd rather go with what you guys are planning on going with and then see it. I mean, the question from where I'm sitting is simply, when the task force has discussed and or approved anything up to this point, were we aware that any changes to zoning on retail spaces would also include consumption on site, or the possibility therefore? And if as Amy
Yes.
just said,
Yes, that is true. And I think we should start. We ended the last meeting saying we were going to have that discussion and
Okay.
just walk through those slides, because we skipped them because we were focused on everything else that the task force hadn't been deliberated. So I'm prepared to do that.
Okay, well, it sounds good. We've got pretty much the same PowerPoint as last time, so we can pick up at that point. But let's go ahead and get through the roll call and consideration of minutes, and then we can dive right into that topic. And it looks like Jennifer Smith has her hand raised. So I've asked her to unmute. She might be able to add to that a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and move off this slide since it's not fully accurate agenda.
Hi, it's Jennifer Smith. I'll be there shortly. I just wanted to, I mean, I think we just cleared it up, but basically state that I understand the concerns that Will and and the people he represents are bringing forward. And I think that is where we'll go to in the next step with development standards. And so I think that we should go back to explaining that to the public as the beginning of our meeting after the minutes are approved.
Okay, sounds good. Oh, I'm kind of losing you at the end, but sounds good. We have a member of the public with their hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and open up public comments on this.
On what? On the roll call?
Well, not the roll call, the issue of this, the on-site consumptions and clarification as to what we're moving on to in this
Wait,
meeting.
that's not an item, Andrew. So if that's what the hands are raised for, then we'll wait till we actually get there. Let's move on with roll call.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on with roll call. Okay, so our representative for North Lake County, William Weiss,
present.
and Jen Coppinger,
Here.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Here.
Rebecca Harper,
Here.
Jennifer Smith is still on her way, but she should be there. We'll make a note of what time she shows up. Nara Del Bach, sorry.
Was she on Zoom?
She is on Zoom, but she will be there in person, I believe. Nara Dabaka,
Present.
Robert Geary. I'm assuming he's not in the room.
No.
Okay,
Nope.
thank you. And we do not have a representative from the fire districts at this point. They are preoccupied today. So with that said, we can go ahead and move on to consideration of minutes from Cannabis Task Force meeting, May 8th and June 12th. So I'll leave it to you guys in the room.
I'm going to jump back to the welcome item, and I just wanted to offer some clarification. A letter was sent to Supervisor Crandall regarding Sarah Bodnar participating as a task force member, some confusion about that at our last meeting. So I just wanted to sort of talk about the process in that the task force approved going through recommendations or a presentation from the cannabis industry. We, to my recollection, and let me know if I'm wrong, we did not limit it to only task force members of the cannabis industry. And so last meeting, when Sarah was helping with the presentation, she was doing so as a representative of the cannabis industry for the presentation only. We all still know that she's not a voting member, so she did not participate in any votes. But the way we go through the normal order of going through these items is similar to the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors meeting, where the presentation is made by staff or the representative. And then the commission, or in this case, the task force, is free to ask any questions before we open then up for public input. And so we're following that same system here. Future presentations may well include members that are not of this task force. And we will also just see them as representatives of whatever industry is doing that presentation for the day. But they won't be given any sort of one-off ability to vote, but neither is their answering questions from the task force considered public input. All right, thanks. We'll move on to minutes.
Thank you, Maria. So I'll leave it to you guys to make a motion or bring up any questions concerning the minutes.
Which ones?
May 1st, that's what we're looking at.
This is Catherine. I'll make a motion to approve and accept the May 8th minutes.
This is Will, I will second that.
Okay, do we want to do a roll call vote?
Yes, please.
All right. William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper.
I, with the amendment that Sarah's last name is spelled wrong in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's corrected. Or Catherine, are you?
May amend the motion
Mhm.
to include
Okay, so we still have an,
name, last name spelling. It's Bognar, correct?
Bodnar.
Oh,
That's
so
how
it's
it is.
spelled right. So it's spelled wrong in other stuff then. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay.
it's spelled ER in a lot of materials, but it
Okay.
is correct.
So it is
I
correct.
don't know.
Okay,
I don't have it in front of me, sorry, but Bodnar, yes.
that's how it is.
Right.
Okay, so
So yeah, we're looking
never
at-
mind the amendment.
Okay.
Sorry, Sarah.
It's okay, no, I thank you, appreciate it.
Sorry, Andrew, keep going.
that's okay. Without that, we can pick up where we left off. Jennifer Smith, has she made it in the room yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, Nara Dabaka.
Aye.
All right, that looks like 5 ayes, and we have an approval for the May 8th meetings, meeting minutes. Let's move on to the June 12th minutes.
Oh, wait, you know what? We didn't ask for public input on the May 8th minutes.
Oh, let's go to public input. We do have a hand raised.
We got a little bit of background noise, Andrew. If you're not speaking, then please make sure you're muted.
Yeah, it looks like Holly Harris with her hand raised was speaking, and that's the background noise,
Okay.
but we're having trouble hearing her. Holly,
Holly, are you speaking to the May? Did you want to speak to the May 8th minutes?
think she might be having issues with her mic. Holly, could you put it in the comments quickly, possibly? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mute Holly for now, and we have another guest with their hand raised. I'm gonna go ahead and allow guest to speak.
Hey, Andrew, it's Angela. I just wanted to let you know that the chat is disabled. You can't do anything in the Zoom.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll have to check that out. Panelists can chat. Everyone can chat. All right, settings are a little off. I was out of the office on Friday, and IT set up this Zoom meeting, so they're set up a little bit different. But it looks like now everyone can chat. So
Okay, thank you.
there we go. Holly Harris. Harris is saying the minutes were not posted. Let me go ahead and bring up the page because I think there's been some confusion about where to find the minutes. And essentially I'm going to show you two links to pull up. So we have our agenda and minutes here. We are still sending out in the meeting package to all the task force members attachments. Approved minutes are going to be found here once they're approved. But to make sure everyone has a copy of the minutes, let me go ahead and thing here. Give me a second. So draft minutes to address this issue. Draft minutes should be in the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force resource documents. Source documents for meetings. So the link is in the agenda there. And on this page, we should have a list of all of the items as well as some draft minutes. But Ruby, maybe you could speak to this as far as where the draft minutes are at on.
Well, we haven't put the draft minutes up yet. So that's
Okay. Well, that brings up an interesting question, Maria, with the public looking like they did not get access to those draft minutes. Can we make a motion or are we going to put these off again?
I think we're gonna have to table it to the next meeting.
All right. Well, we will
Has
be
to have access.
Okay.
Sorry, that
Well,
was
with-
my confusion then.
It's okay. It's all right. With, yeah, so
No problem.
a vote to rescind the approval of the minutes, please, and carry them over to the next meeting.
I have a question. So when we do review these minutes at our next meeting, do we want to change Jennifer Smith to present? Since she did end up joining the meeting.
Yes, the minutes should note when she is present. People who aren't, or task force members who aren't present at the start of the meeting, then get recorded someplace in the minutes when they were present.
Okay. So a motion to rescind.
Motion to rescind.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay, thanks. So rescind, Will, any second?
I just have to.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. We are gonna get the hang of this. But access for the public to whatever we're going over is definitely required.
And could not agree more. I really just want to ask, is there any sort of complication that we're going to encounter in the future related to the posting in advance of minutes for previous meetings? Because I think this came up once before that there was like a question around if to be posted to that website are documents that are still in draft form, right? Was that also not a question?
We got that cleared up.
We did, okay.
Yes,
So I just
minutes
feel- I
that
just
are
feel
in
like we're
draft
having a
form can be uploaded to the agenda for which they are going to be considered.
Okay.
Then when they are not in draft form anymore, when the task force has approved them, they then go to that minutes for the meeting itself.
And I don't mean to pick
Line.
on any detail of this, I just like know that someone is going to remind me later about the public posting of the minute, and so anyway, I just want to make sure I have that.
We got it clear.
Thank you.
Sometimes I feel like I'm making Ruby learn her job by braille, kind of,
Well,
so not great training. So she's picking it up.
And the last time when I had posted the minutes, I guess I had posted draft minutes in the final position, and then I took them down, and then
I
I
remember
was
this,
sending
yes,
them
right.
to you guys like through email, and then I was told not to. So it was this thing that it's my learning.
It's okay.
So I'm so sorry.
It's more
But I
complicated
will-
than
I
it
won't
ought to
be-
be, I know.
I won't be able to
You're okay.
do that.
You're
So
okay.
in the, from here forward, are we shifting from action minutes to?
Nope, we should just have action minutes. Is it not action minute format?
No, in the June 12th one, it's not.
No, that one needs some
It's
correction.
very,
Okay, so
as I was saying.
we're gonna maintain action minute style. And we will have the corrected minutes put up for the next meeting then.
Okay.
So throw those out.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, format is very detailed.
Okay, so for
Okay.
consideration of minutes to the June 12th, we're gonna go ahead and continue that to the next meeting.
Can you take a vote on that? You just do it.
It's,
The eight minutes aren't action minutes either. Please use them.
okay,
If you want them to be action, I don't personally have a preference, but if we are sticking with action minutes, then those would both need to be.
good. Yeah, we're gonna do it consistent with planning commission, zoning administrator, and board of supervisor styles.
Aye, Captain.
Okay, so can we have a? Let's
We
see,
can-
Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on the June 12th minutes before we continue them?
We do have one hand raised. I just wanted to point out before I allow Paul to talk, there's also a comment that his mic is disabled. That's part of it because Jake and IT set up this web meeting as a webinar, so it functions more like a planning commission and board of supervisor where, you know, someone has to unmute you as opposed to our kind of more casual task force meetings. But anyway, on the agenda, just to clarify, I think everybody realizes the agendas and the minutes. This link here is going to be on every agenda and it will take you to this page here where you can find that agenda and you can find the minutes from that meeting. And then for the draft minutes, we will have them listed and numbered with the date down here, and you can reach that through this link. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead. It looks like Paul took his hand down, but I just allowed you to speak or asked to unmute if you're wanting to say something, Paul.
I just want to let you guys know that I was here via Zoom.
Okay, thank you. All right, Paul Blues is here.
Oh, great. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so yeah, Paul Blues present at. Okay, so now we're on to the next item, consideration of permit types required for license types allowed in the county of Lake.
Okay, moving on. It's pretty much a similar slideshow to last time. Didn't change too much, but I did add this slide because I wanted to just do a quick review of the different permitting types that you're going to be making decisions on as we go through these different license types. There are two basic types of permits we issue at CDD: ministerial permits and discretionary permits. Where this would apply to cannabis, we have zoning clearances, and this is for uses that are by right uses within that zone. That zone is designed for those types of uses. It's a procedure that we do to verify the use by right. It only requires basic documents to be submitted. We can typically do them over the counter, and it involves a checklist and a CDD stamp on your documents. Zoning permits are very much similar. They're a procedure to verify allowable uses as opposed to a use by right, but still something you're allowed to do with a zoning permit. We could still do these with basic documents. They can be done over the counter. In a few cases, they can involve some agency review, or we'll send them out to get signed off. A lot of times, other agencies, in order to issue your permit from, let's say, environmental health or something, they're going to require the zoning permit from our department. So to get your major permission to do something that another department would give you the authority to do, you would have to come to us to get that zoning permit first. And then one note for zoning permits, they are required for adult personal medicinal cultivation, something we don't talk a lot about. We're really focused on the cannabis industry, commercial cannabis as a business, but we do have a lot of people in this county who cultivate cannabis for personal use, and there's a set of rules that they need to apply, and they need to come in and get that proper zoning permit. Then on the other side of it, we have discretionary use permits, minor use permits, and major use permits. Both of these I would call conditional use permits. They come with, conditions of approval, and those can be adjusted and made to custom fit each project individually. The procedure is to review allowable uses or use proposals. More detailed documents are required. It involves agency and tribal review, as well as a CEQA analysis. The main difference is that minor use permits go to a zoning administrator hearing, which we run here through CDD, and then major use permits go to the planning commission automatically. Now, if there's a time we have a minor use permit and there's some issues and debates between neighbors and public, we can elevate that and then take it to the planning commission for their determination. But if there's no conflict or no issue, then it can be resolved through a zoning administrator. But with that said, I'm going to open it up to kind of a more open dialogue. We might want to address the issue of consumption now, or at least clarified if we haven't clarified it already, before we move on to the different license types and what permits we would like to require for those?
That is a great idea. Let's do that.
Okay, we've got Jennifer Smith's hand raised. Should I go ahead and let her talk? And then it sounded like someone else in the room was.
Yeah, Andrew, I was just gonna, this is Sarah, I was gonna request that you pull up the slide for type 10 retail while we address this issue.
Go ahead to type 10. Oh. Here we go. So Sarah's in the room there. Jennifer's on her way. Should I hand it over to you guys, or?
Was Jennifer going to present
She
that?
does have her hand raised. We can allow her to talk, but I'm not sure if she's seen the slide, but we'll find out.
Let's let her start and I can follow.
Okay.
And we also have Nara there. Yeah, I can present. I'm just trying to find parking at the moment. If we look at this slide, so just some clarity around consumption lounges. Consumption lounges are, in essence, a subcategory of retail. So in all of the locations where we have tentatively, where we, the task force, have approved retail, through the development standard conversations is where we will talk about on-site consumption and whether it will be allowed in that location and how and in what form it will be allowed. So I just want to make sure that everybody on the task force is aware of that, as well as the public, because there seems to be a misconception that it is an entirely separate license type, and it is not.
This is
Oh.
Sarah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, okay.
This is Sarah speaking, and on this slide, I just transcribed the recommendations that this task force had previously approved. And on the chart that we were all looking at last week, those were the R's that were in black, just to make this easy to reference. Anything that hadn't yet been discussed was a red R. And this came to the task force some months ago when the board asked us to revisit the retail licensing within the county. And this was because they felt like there was a concentration of retail in certain areas. And this was in part because of the way that it was zoned for retail. There were certain parts of the county where you could get where it was basically a zoning permit or zoning clearance to get retail. And then other places where it was not allowed or more restrictive. And so that was sent to the task force by the BOS to look at retail overall. And at that time, we gave a presentation about the state of retail and all of the different types of retail that are actually available, and that there are uses that we have not yet enabled here in the county of Lake that are allowable under state law. And just to underline what Jen said, this is the list of all the DCC licenses, and we had this attached to a previous agenda. And if you read this, there's nowhere that it says consumption lounge, because consumption lounge is not a license type. It is like a subcategory of the storefront retail. And I put that here in the description. Enabling this use could allow on-site consumption in a setting like a tasting room or a lounge. So on the sheet that we were referencing last week, we didn't talk about these line items, but I actually broke it down with more detail to make it clearer. We have a line for storefront type 10 retail on the grid, and then under that, on-site consumption and on-farm consumption. Now, just to reiterate, those are not a permit or a license. It's just a use. And because this is all so confusing, I put it there because that's, as we were talking about it, that's what it would look like in the zones that we recommended it. Like if we added retail in ag zones, it would be on-farm retail, like a tasting room, like a winery. And back then, we had another grid. I know this is attached to many agenda items where we looked at, I'm just going to hold it up here, not that you can actually see it, but you guys will remember it. A grid, and it described the other uses that the county allows in those zones, and then how we felt cannabis.
Well, I'm going back behind you now.
Tasting rooms might fit into that. So just a little bit of history and to provide the breadcrumb trail to how we got to those black R's on that thing. To drill it down a little bit further, what we had suggested is that the county consider allowing on-site consumption where it's appropriate based on maybe existing uses. So in some cases, we recommended if it's an ancillary service to an existing hotel or something, but not building a whole new thing. A tasting room on a farm could be allowable. And all of the details around exactly, how it can look in terms of can it be indoors, can it be outdoors, what are the hours of operation that consumption is allowed, what are the HVAC requirements, that all goes into development standards that are determined by the county, and the permit for doing so is also determined by the county. Back then, when we had this conversation, this task force, I believe, it's on this slide, had suggested major use permits for certain zones and then minor use permits for other zones, considering kind of the sensitivity of the other activities.
So if I understand correctly, the task force has not made any recommendations regarding on-site consumption, correct? Is that?
No, false. Based on the meeting we had, it specifically, the things we voted on were retail, on-site consumption, retail on-fire consumption, and that's how we arrived.
Oh, we did vote on those
Yes,
at the
we
last
did.
meeting? Okay.
Not at the last meeting. We didn't discuss this at the last meeting because we had discussed this in our previous batch of recommendations around retail that was going to the BOS. That's why we didn't spend time on it this last meeting. I just copied that information from that meeting, the zoning chart that we had agreed upon, into this slide deck. Because we had and I don't remember the date of that meeting, but it was way previous to this.
It was quite a long while ago when we made the recommendations about where storefront retail was to be allowed.
I remember that.
And I think that kind of ties into what Will was saying at the beginning of this meeting, is that maybe some members of the public or task force members weren't aware that on-site consumption was a subset of license type 10.
Okay,
And
so
I'll
task
just-
force has already taken action on
It
that.
has, and
Is
this,
that accurate?
I'm not-
Because I can't remember. I thought we said that we weren't talking
no,
about
that
on-site
was not,
consumption.
that was not accurate. We did talk about it. And it was all, this chart was actually approved by the task force. And it says specifically in here, on-site consumption throughout. And this was our attachment to a previous meeting. We did go through this and we did vote on it, and that did go, it was supposed to go along to the Board of Supervisors. And I apologize, I don't remember the date, but we spent a long time deliberating this, and on-site consumption was always part of that conversation as a subset of the retail type 10.
I do remember us talking about it as a subset of type 10, but I also remember us specifically saying we are going to consider storefront retail, on-site.
Yeah, that was the direction of the Board of Supervisors. I had put that in the slides, that they specifically did not want us to address on-site consumption, just the retail. So yes, in essence, as the retail move forward with on-site consumption being part of that use, a subcategory of use, sure, it moved forward, but at the same time, it wasn't addressed specifically. So again, and with the fact there isn't a separate license type for.
And for clarification, when you just said the Board of Supervisors and then what we voted on, this is what we voted on, was this.
Well,
chart.
you had added it to the document, but it wasn't what the board wanted us to focus on. I'm going to see if I can pull something up to.
My clarification is simply that we did discuss on-site consumption as part of our conversation. I know that the board hadn't originally asked that, but we had included it, and I just wanted to check for clarification if that's what this task force.
I would encourage us to reflect back on the minutes following that meeting, because I'm pretty sure there's probably a notation about deliberately discussing
That's what I
on-site
remember.
consumption at a
But we
later
can
date,
double
although
check.
I do understand that it's a subset of.
Yeah, and that maybe
Right.
this is that later date. My understanding was that we agreed upon all of these things, and that's what the recommendations were, to send this along to the board.
So let's see the minutes.
What I remember is that the board said we want to hear about retail and we would like your discussion on retail. We don't want to talk about consumption. And
Right,
but I
because it
don't
was
know
just
whether
retail
that was
density.
related to a cannabis event license specifically, or if it was consumption generally.
No, the board
But I
directed
know that
staff.
they said-
The board directed staff to come back to them with options regarding retail density
Right.
issues. It did not include on-site consumption, and so that's why I remember we separated the two
Was it
to talk
functional?
about later.
Was it
But
functional?
we'll need to find the minutes.
was it functionally possible to separate the two? I think was a matter of.
Right.
Sure,
I think
yeah.
for development standards it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem, because at this point, the policymakers, the board of supervisors has not created any sort of mechanism to allow on-site consumption. So it's not allowed yet.
And in this table, we suggested a bunch of uses that are not presently allowed, because that was the purpose of, going over the whole facilities ordinance, maybe allowing them in new zones or allowing a new license type altogether, like the shared manufacturing facility. So my question is it worth talking through these zonings now in the same way that we did and vote on it on every other license type as last week?
I don't think that makes sense if we're going through standards for the rest of the recommendations we made at a later date. It would make sense to me to go through these standards at that same time.
I'm sorry,
which isn't
let me
today, right?
rephrase my question. Last week, I presented on every single license type that's in the zoning table and the recommendations we made, and then the task force voted on them if we wanted to support them. We did not do that for type 10 because my understanding was that we previously deliberated it. So should we go through that now and have the task force discuss and vote on that?
Well,
No, we don't
the
need
agenda
to
item
because-
is permit types for licenses. So if we're talking about a use, we can agendize that. If we have not already approved it in previous minutes, we'll agendize that for the next meeting, because it's kind of going back to what we did last week, but that's not on our agenda today.
My understanding is that right now we're gonna go through license types or license,
Yeah.
whether it's a major use permit or minor use permit. And when we get there, we can have further discussion on that specific category.
Yeah, the task force hasn't opted into having that discussion for type 10, so we may have to agendize that for the next meeting.
Which would just mean next meeting, we have one item that talks about whether we're going to recommend it in what zoning districts and at what permit level. That's fine.
But we already made the general recommendations for type 10 where that's allowed.
Retail.
So we don't need to do
So
that.
we're-
We just need
okay.
to talk
Right.
about.
We're basically now at the same point for our previous recommendations regarding type 10 and every other type. We're all at the same spot.
Yep.
We just can't talk about on-site cultivation at this meeting because it's not agenda.
Consumption.
On-site, yes, consumption,
Maria,
sorry,
for
too many Cs, guys.
Your purpose, Business and Professions Code 26200G is the on-site consumption.
Cool.
Do you have from March 13th approved minutes? I don't know if we want to go into this. So consideration of recommendations on cannabis retail sales, limitations on concentrations or locations of cannabis retail sales. The PowerPoint from that said BOS requests only focus on storefront retail with or without delivery. Do not focus on retail sales for micro business at this time. Other retail related issues can be reviewed at a later time.
And then in those minutes, there's a notation that says discussion of consumption lounges was postponed to a future meeting.
Cool. All right. That'll be next meeting.
Okay. Well,
So
we got
good.
that resolved. Yeah, but since we're looking at last week license types, which zones to put them, there isn't a special license type for consumption as mentioned. So it's not really, it doesn't really need to be addressed. It definitely can fall into that development standard. So with that said, should I go back to, we do have, should I open up public comment on this topic? We got Holly Harris with her hand raised.
Still not an item yet, but we've had robust discussion. So yeah, let's see if Holly wanted to speak to that too.
Holly, I just asked to unmute.
So she's just muted.
Seems like, okay.
Hey, Holly, maybe you want to call in.
I think we're having issues with your mic. She's writing in the chat room. Can I make a suggestion? The host is not allowing me to unmute. I'm requesting that you unmute. I can hear you now, but we can barely hear you. Okay, Holly, we also have Paul Bernaccio with his hand raised.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to Paul Bernaccio, then Holly, I'll come back to you, or if you want to put your comments in the chat, if you're continuing to have mic issues. All right, Paul Bernaccio, you are on. Paul, we have asked you to unmute yourself. Okay. Paul seems to have unmuted, but he is not coming through either.
Yes.
Okay, well, with that said, we're having some issues with Holly and Paul. We can keep checking that. In the meantime, Holly did make a comment in the chat room. She wrote 2, keep the retail sales zoning use permits as approved and add in another zoning line item for retail sales with consumption lounges to be agendized for discussion. This is currently being done for cannabis license type 13 distributor, which has 2 distinct zoning designations. Details below. Approved by the task force last week. So there is that suggestion.
Let's just move on now to number 5. We've got 40 minutes left for our meeting and it would be good if we get this done.
Okay, Paul just wants to ask a quick question. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. I apologize with the mic issue again.
If it is related to the retail discussion that we are not taking any action on and are going to handle next week, then that's fine. If not, we're going to move on to number 5.
I think that's it. He's one of our retail sales operators. So it seems as proposed that I would need another major use permit to have a consumption lounge.
We haven't done that yet. We haven't approved, we haven't made any recommendations for consumption lounges, nor have we actually talked about development standards or permit types. So just hold on to the question, Paul. I think it'll get clarified as we go forward. Let's start with 5, please.
Let's go to number 5 and just clarification. It goes to the fact that we have a permissive zoning ordinance. If it's not mentioned, we don't allow it. And there's no mention of consumption in our current ordinance. All right, with that said, let's go back to the beginning of our license types. Okay, there's been an overview of the different permits, ministerial, discretionary, zoning clearance, zoning permit, major and minor use permits. With that said, we can start moving on to the license types, and I will hand it back to the conference room, whoever wants to take over that. Did Jennifer make it into the conference room?
Jennifer is here.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it to you guys. I'm going to mute myself. So.
Thanks. So we do already have our recommendations in this PowerPoint that we've gone through. And so opening this part of the zoning process to the group. This is the nursery. As a reminder, these are plants that are not reaching maturity. They are for B2B sales, and we can also discuss during development standards if we want a retail nursery. But right now we are suggesting that a minor use permit be allowed in basically what are the cultivation zones of APZ, A, TPZ, RL, and RR, adding in, sorry, it is already there, SR, but adding in M1, M2, and MP. And the reason we'd like to add those more manufacturing type zones is because you'll see in a nursery business, the plants are maybe 6 to 10 inches tall. There are multiple levels of rack systems with lights on each level of those racks. You do often see nurseries in a more manufacturing or industrial type location as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be in what we typically think of a very farming environment. And then we were, due to the nature of zone C3, we were seeking a major use permit in that area.
Any questions from the task force? We'll open it up to public. Holly has her hand up. Not that I know of.
Hi, can you hear me?
We're still waiting for Holly. One moment.
Sorry, Holly took her hand down.
Oh, okay, great.
This is about.
So it seems to me that Holly would be asking about acreage minimums and how much quote unquote canopy. And I'm not putting words into her mouth, I'm just saying that one of,
That was Paul for
I'll
not
ask
you.
them about that.
sorry.
Valerie, were you there with the, it looks like Valerie's taking her hand down as well.
Okay,
I'm gonna go ahead and mute
we do
her.
have a hand up in
Regardless of who
the,
said it,
in
it
the
still needs to
room.
be addressed.
Sarah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to say like how, and we talked about this last week, how important nurseries are for the local industry. And one thing we didn't discuss, but is really important and cool, and why putting it in these more manufacturing zones is advantageous, is that people are using different technologies like tissue culture to actually make plant babies. And so those are appropriate in those kinds of settings.
All right,
Can we throw back to Jennifer to talk about Paul's question anyways, because I.
about
Limitations.
limitations. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that means, do you need to have a minimum size parcel, or is there a limit on how much canopy? that-
There is, are you guys seeing the PDF?
That is absolutely illegible.
Yeah, we see that there is a PDF, but
It's not readable? Hang on one second.
Correct, it is
Zoom
tight
in
and
from
very
the light.
small.
There you go.
So there
Is
were
that-
some standards already in place.
So-
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, this table is a little confusing, hard to read, and with the new ordinance, hopefully we can, format in a much better way. But you can see type 4 down here. This would be our nursery licenses. Up here in this column in the previous page, minimum lot size in acres. So you would need 20-acre lots for 22,000 square feet of nursery space. That's the current setup that our ordinance has. So we can revisit those details when we get to those development and performance standards, but that is what we are looking at.
okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just gonna say that, that's already in place where we already have nurseries
Yeah.
allowed. And so we'll need to, again, in development standards, develop what the, what that looks like in a more industrial setting.
Good point. Okay, and Valerie, I saw your hand go up and down. Did you have something you wanted to add to nursery? Yeah, go ahead, Valerie. Andrew, work your webinar magic.
I'm working on it. Looks like.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just want to definitely reiterate that there are different types of genetics coming through where you would need more of an industrial type setting. As Sarah was talking about the zero gen tissue culture, you definitely do need something called cold storage and different lab techniques and making genetics and things like that. This will allow the cannabis industry in our area to be more involved in breeding projects to bring new strains and different awesome terpenes to our community to make it a more, I would say, robust cannabis area with higher end genetics and strains available to our local farms.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the Zoom room? Holly, or Valerie, put your hand down, please. And Andrew, do you see?
Yes, we have guess. I think that's Angela.
It is. Thank you. I just wanted a clarification. So looking at the top of this slide, it says minor use permit and it shows the base zones, major use permit, base zone, PDC. At the bottom, the recommended zoning, major use only shows C3. So are we recommending to remove PDC, or is C3 in addition to PDC? It's just minor use has everything listed, but major use just has C3. Thank you.
It would be in addition.
It would be in addition to it. I'll confess that when I was working on this chart, the PDC column got cut off, so I had to go back in and add that R. So that was my error. Thanks for catching it.
Oh, thank you.
So the recommendation is to keep major use permit and PDC?
It is,
Okay.
yes. And so C3 and PDC would be major use permit.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the task force for recommendation or discussion. Motion.
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the recommended zoning with the understanding that it doesn't mean it's a slam dunk. There's still going to be a lot of other hoops. I just want this for the public, but I will make the recommendation that we include I'll make a motion that we approve the recommended zoning.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second? Sorry for
Nara, second. Andrew, can you do roll call, please?
Yes, give me 1 second. Rather than go back and forth on my slides, I'm just gonna pull up a different list. So. Okay, ready for a roll call? We have William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Del Baca,
Aye.
Robert Geary, not present. And we do not have a physical presence for a representative from the fire district.
Yeah, but he gets to vote, right? Isn't Paul online?
Paul is online. So he would be able to vote zooming in. I thought they could only have two meetings where they would be allowed to do that according to the Brown Act.
But last meeting,
They were.
Willie was in person, so he's the
Right,
voting
true.
representative.
Yep.
So Paul doesn't have any meetings that he's been online.
Okay, I think
So
we're
he can
good.
vote.
Okay. All right. With that said, let's move on to the next slide.
Wait,
Paul.
Oh,
Paul,
He still needs to vote.
Yeah.
oh, Paul. Okay, we are.
Do you want to use your Zoom vote today?
my word.
Yeah, that is the factor. We're seeing this with our planning commissioners too. Now that the pandemic is over, the planning commissioners and the task force members are allowed, if there's a physical quorum presence, they can zoom in and take part, including making motions on items only twice per year. So it's, do you want to use it now or save it? The vote that pretty much passed with or without it. So
Is he unmuted to answer that question?
I've hit the ask
Thank
to
you.
there he is. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and save it for right now.
All right,
Thank you.
Okay.
so that passes. Excellent. Next, please.
Okay, well, it looks like we have type in manufacturing, but we had no changes recommended. We do require for a minor use permit in these base zones. Do we
Let's not
want to
go over it. If we
revisit
don't have
that?
any recommendation, let's just skip to the next one, please. I'm worried about time.
Yeah, I understand, but there is a possibility to change the use permit required for this license type. If anyone wants to raise it, if not, I'll move on to the next one.
There's no recommendation, but
Okay. All right, moving on, another license type P, minor use permits required in those base zoning districts. We have no recommendation. Shall we leave it at that?
Yep.
Okay. Again, same situation for license type 6. All right, license type 7. We do have recommended zoning, a major use permit to be required in M1 and MP zoning.
And this is where the, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that these are the manufacturing licenses that do use volatile inputs. It's a different license type. It has stricter development standards from the state level and would have the same higher development standards locally as well. So we are requesting that these are opened up to be allowed in M1 and MP because those are additionally manufacturing type zones, and we would suggest a major use permit for this.
yeah, are we keeping M2 or are we eliminating that?
We would be keeping M2.
Okay,
Oh,
so it's in addition to.
Correct.
Okay.
It's right, there's a little zone right here.
Are there any questions from the task force or in the Zoom room?
That's the, right, that's the.
No hands in the Zoom room.
All right, so the recommendation would be to add M1 and MP with a major use permit. I think actually we already added M1 and MP last meeting, so this is just to keep those as a major use permit.
I would offer a motion that we require a major use permit in zones M1 and MP.
I'll second that. This is Catherine.
That was
That
Jennifer.
was Jennifer. Sorry.
Okay, roll call, please.
William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Dalbaka.
Aye.
Robert Geary is not present, and Paul is passing on motions this meeting. So looks like motion carries. Move on to the next. License type S, shared manufacturing. Recommended zoning looks like minor use permits in type 6 or N for M1, M2, and MP zoning, and then a major use for type 7, M1, M2, MP.
And again, this would be if you were adding the type S to your already established type 6. So if it's a type 6, which is the non-volatile, we would suggest a minor use permit. If you're adding the type S to your volatile type 7, we would then suggest a major use permit, which keeps it in line with what we previously suggested on the type 6 and type 7 standalones.
And what we did here is just recommend allowing these shared manufacturing facilities where manufacturing is allowed.
Any questions in the task force?
I have a
Go ahead.
question. So, I don't mean to call attention to the enormous map that no one in the public is able to see. But that, I'm noting, as Nora actually just did to me, that there's no noting of NP on the map.
Because we don't have it.
We don't have it.
No, it exists in our zoning ordinance. It does not exist on the map yet.
Which is totally fine, and that may, well, I mean, I take your word that's the case.
Yep.
It is, am I not mistaken, planned manufacturing, is that?
I think it's maybe
Industrial park, essentially.
Okay, never mind anyway. Fine.
so we might get them someday,
Right,
but
and they have
we don't have it right now.
Okay.
Originally, in like 2014, when they were first working on cannabis policy, that was kind of one of the ideas is let's centralize, like create hubs where we could have all different types of license types, but then that just doesn't do it.
That's pretty hard to get there.
It is, yeah. Okay, so any other questions with the task force? If not, we'll open it up for public input on license type S.
There are no hands in the Zoom room.
Bring it back to task force. For discussion. And or motion.
I would move to accept the recommendation as noted on the slide here for license type S.
I'll second that.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Dabaka,
Aye.
then Robert Geary and Paul Blues are not, well, one is not present and one is not making a motion. So motion carries. On to the next item. So license type 11 distributor. They're allowed with the major use permit in the base zones listed. They've recommended zoning was expanded. And I'm going to pass it on over to Jennifer to kind of address some of this.
So as you can see, we recommended a minor use permit in the cultivation areas. And that would really be if it was a standalone permit application, a minor, and not in conjunction with any other cannabis business. We would suggest just a zoning permit over the counter if it is in conjunction to a licensed cultivation or any other actual licensed operation. That being, it becomes more of an add-on or an accessory permit to what's already an existing business. And then go through the full minor use permit in those zones if it is a standalone. And just to speak anecdotally about these types of permits, the reason that we're suggesting this way is because if you already have a licensed operation, this adding on a distributor license is not full of additional impacts that might be concerned or whereas if you were a standalone business that hasn't gone through any of the previous permitting process, the hearings and whatnot, that this would give the opportunity for that conversation and for those standards to be followed through the permitting process.
I would also like to add something that in addition to just as an add-on, I would also limit it to previously approved cultivation area. Because if it causes an expansion into land that has not been evaluated for CEQA, then we wouldn't be able to do a zoning permit just because it's ministerial.
That's
So-
back to me.
Glad you mentioned that. I was also thinking
Yeah.
about impervious surface. If they're building a new building, even within the cultivation area, we hadn't looked at that impervious surface. Would that be an issue, Maria?
So I would say then, instead of as an add-on to license operation, I would say within previously approved cultivation area.
Can
Okay.
I ask that we go back to type 6 and 7?
For, wait, do we want to finish this?
License, no, because
Okay.
this has to do with this.
Okay.
So I wanted to look and see about whether type 6, whether we're missing any types that a manufacturer wanted to add on a type 11 so they could distribute their product if we have a manufacturer.
We'll get to that when we get to type 11.
So-
Type 11.
We're on type 11.
And
So
we
what
don't
you're
have the
asking is if,
manufacturing zones in here.
Yeah, we do. They're already in, they're
Yeah,
I
already.
think to clarify,
M1, M2, PUC, and we don't have
MP.
MP in there. Is that, do we want to add MP? I was just trying to make sure we didn't.
If we
miss
wanted
anything.
to add a district, we have to put it on next week's agenda.
Okay.
Because we did districts last time.
Well,
So,
maybe
stick a
MP
pin
can
in that
come
and-
ask for zone change if they want to do it.
Maybe they could.
Which doesn't yet
Developers
exist, but
do
I
It doesn't.
Yeah.
do agree that that was an
Yeah.
omission and it would have been an appropriate use. But we
Okay.
were mostly thinking about this to enable cannabis farmers to be able to bring their own product directly to testing labs and those kinds of things, which I think is the more common use case.
Yeah, and I had to see the list just to make sure that we didn't
Yeah.
miss any of the manufacturing zones.
Okay. Is the task force amenable to the amendment of that wording on zoning permit? So it would be an add-on to a license operation within the previously approved cultivation area.
So what's the pathway if they want to do it outside of the previously approved?
Then they'd have to
cultivation
get a minor use permit. Or, yeah, then they'd have to get a use permit. That would
Yeah.
require, yeah. 'cause
and
we-
it looks like those other use permits would require a major use permit anyway. So if they're, let's say something requires a minor use permit, like a nursery as recommended. But if that nursery is also part of a cultivation that requires a major use permit, we just put it all together in one major use permit.
So
That would be a new.
this is Sarah. It sounds like what is being said, I'm just rephrasing here, is that it could be a major use permit if it is a standalone permit application or outside of the previously approved cultivation area. And it could be a zoning permit if it is an add-on to a licensed operation within the approved zoning area.
Except that says minor use permit, so you said major.
I'm
You
sorry,
mean
I
minor.
would, yeah, I mean
Yeah.
minor. I was meant to be reading exactly as
Yeah,
it says on
and
the
the
slide, with just
definition.
modifying is if it's a if it's a standalone permit application or if it exceeds the existing approved cultivation area.
Right, so we've got APZ, TPC, RL, RSR. Yeah, so the zoning districts mirror each other.
Mhm.
Yep, I agree. Does everybody know what I just agreed to? Are we clear? So we
And-
approved the zoning districts, APZ-A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR as places where we could do license type 11 distributor. It would be a zoning permit if it's an add-on to already existing and does not cause any expansion.
Within an existing site plan.
Exactly. And if not, then it would prompt a minor use permit. I don't know if we can do that, because if it's pre-existing, let's say, okay, Andrew, help me with this. If it's an existing major use permit, it would be a modification to that use permit, which would still go through the major use permit process. So saying that it would be a minor use permit isn't gonna work if it was previously, if like, say they've got a cannabis cultivation operation and that was a major, I have to
Well-
take it through the same process.
We do have a little bit of wiggle room there in the sense that the conditions of approval and our ordinance supports that for major use permits, the zoning administrator can approve minor modifications without the need to go through the discretionary permit process. Would this be considered minor modification? If it's all in pre-existing structure on a pre-existing cultivation area, then you're not really changing anything. You're not adding environmental impacts to it. But if you're building a new structure and it's kind of over on the edge, it would be one of those things we'd want to look at each application. So it's It's like that.
Okay, then how about instead of a recommendation of minor use permit, we would just say modification to the existing permit?
We could do that.
Okay, and I think we're good.
And we're leaving C3, M1, M2, PDC alone.
Correct. Can you restate what you just said,
Oh.
Maria?
Okay, so what I think we're saying,
Try it as a motion.
oh, good, go ahead, Nora.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion that we accept, I'll make a motion that we that the task force recommends a modification to the use permit for adding a type 11 distributor license for APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR. And if it's a standalone new permit application or an expansion outside the existing permitted cannabis area, existing permitted cannabis site plan, that a minor use permit would be required in those same zones, APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR. Capture that?
Okay, I think that's right, except, sorry, if it's an expansion, it is still a modification to a use permit. So if it's an add-on or an expansion, the modification to the use permit is fine. If it's a standalone new permit, that's where we go minor. Yeah. Does that make sense, everybody? Thanks, Ruth.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Nara, do you,
So I have a question. If somebody has another license type in C3, M1, M2, or PDC, how will they be able to use this license type?
Well, that would be similar to what she just described if you had
But
a
if
use
we
permit
didn't-
for your farm.
But we didn't include those zones in the recommendation.
Oh, right.
So
I don't know that we're removing anything to what's
Yeah.
existing. These are just the additions.
But if you, what she's saying is it would be a more difficult, potentially more difficult process for somebody to, they would have to apply separately instead of doing it as a modification. And because they would already be in an existing structure, it's unlikely they would have to build in a structure.
So we should
Right.
include in our recommendations, now hearing this feedback, that the zoning permit would be recommended as an add-on to a license operation in these new zones and the zones where it's currently allowed.
Do we have to do that next time then? Because we're,
No,
Those
because
zones
the zones
weren't-
are already allowed,
Okay.
so it's just enabling this add-on.
Only it's not zoning permit, it's modification.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
But that line could
In-
include,
including,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I mention something? Because there was a bit of confusion when I showed up here as to what past planners were doing in terms of requiring minor modifications to use as opposed to an amendment to the use permit. And these terms, it gets a little confusing and convoluted because there's amendments according to CEQA, then there's the amendments according to our use permits and our zoning ordinance. But there was, a point where it was a lot of past applications of modifications was interpreted by county council as so that they didn't, basically the modification wasn't the appropriate course, especially in terms of expansions, and that amendments needed to be made, which is pretty much going through a whole new use permit. But with that said, to a certain extent, keeping them as zoning permits would keep the process a lot cleaner. So just providing that for any clarification, or maybe I confused everyone more.
So we had a motion and a second, but we didn't open it up for public. So let's make sure before we take action, we'll open that up for public.
Okay, we have guest, which I believe is Angela. I should know that.
Yes, thank you. And I don't know why it says it twice. So just a little clarification, if you guys can offer it on this type 11 distributor license. It says the procurement, sale, and transport of cannabis. Now I know it opens it up to allow operators to take their own product to labs and different places. But can a person apply for a type 11 distributor license solely as its own business? Like that's all that they do? And if so, would those people that don't have a cultivation permit need to go through like a major use for something like this, since they're going to be storing product?
The transport,
That's,
not store product.
Right, yeah, so Angela, the answer to the first part is yes, you could just be a distributor.
Okay, so you could just be a distributor, but so the procurement, they go and get it, they buy it, and then they sell it, so they don't store it at any point there?
Yeah, a distributor would store it, yeah, because they're responsible for maintaining custody of the product while it goes out for testing.
Okay,
So
so
it's
then,
kind of like a broker.
oh, yeah, right, so in those cases where they're just the broker, would those situations, would those require a major use permit? Because, because they don't have another permit that they're tagging onto that's already gone through review, because they're probably gonna need a building with security, all
So
of those
what-
things.
Angela, what you described exists currently. If you're an independent standalone distributor, the line that Andrew is pointing to with the mouse right now, you can currently right now, and we have these here in Lake County, there have been a couple of them on the phone the last 2 meetings that represent their distro companies. You get a major use permit in those zones, and we're seeking to expand that and also allow farms to be able to apply for this license in zones where they may be co-located. But what you described already exists, and we have them here operating in the county presently under major use permits.
Right, I know that, but that's my question, so, okay, so we're not gonna be opening up any of these other zones for a standalone distributor, because those ones right now require a major use permit.
the slide shows that we would open them up through a minor use permit in APZ, Ag, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR zoning districts. So
I guess
as
I'm getting
standalone,
confused.
those are,
Yes.
that's as standalone, yeah.
So I guess I'm getting confused because a minor use doesn't require, it has no agency review.
It does.
Oh, it does. Okay, I thought it.
Yeah,
did.
it's pretty much the same as a major use, except one goes to zoning administrator hearing, and the other goes to planning commission. So one is more of an internal hearing and the other is more of a public hearing.
Okay.
They're actually both public.
Well, yes, that's true. They are both public.
Okay, thank
yeah.
you. I just wanted to get that. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Valerie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Valerie Peng. I have a question. So this distribution license, the procurement, sale, and transport of cannabis, will these licenses be able to procure and sell other farms, or is this a self-distribution license?
This is not self, this is the type 11 distributor.
Okay, so this is the actual, they can have any farm's product and they can sell it and transport it.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay. And then when we talk about, those modifications to a major use application. So a lot of us in the farming community, we actually don't know what is approvable for a minor change or a modification. I think that this will come up a lot more later on. And it's kind of just coming up right now as I see, okay, well, if we wanted to apply for this, what would the definition of a small minor change be? And as we get towards kind of upgrading our cultivations and things like that and changing things around if things don't work, I think that there just needs to be some clarification for sure, and procedures created, like maybe a modification, major use application if there's a modification, because right now I just was told basically, oh, turn in your site plan with your modification. There is no procedure for that yet from my understanding. But with these new things coming in and all these development standards, it seems like a lot of these things would be a kind of this like minor change that can be approved by an administrator. But I think there just needs to be some clarification and a procedure.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments from Zoom? If not, we'll bring it back to the task force for action. We have a motion and a second. Andrew, would you do roll call, please?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, William Weiss.
Hang on 1 second.
Can I?
Okay.
Sounded like there was a friendly amendment from Rebecca, for adding in the, C3, M1, and 2 and PDC for, the modification.
Okay, so you're amending your motion?
I'm amending my motion. Do I need to say it again?
No.
as previously stated.
I accept Rebecca's friendliness.
Right, so this would just be an addition to add in existing zoning districts into the same permitting. Great. Roll call, please, Andrew.
William Weiss,
Aye.
Dan Cuppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Dabaka,
Aye.
Robert Geary is not present, and we do not have a voting member from the fire districts here.
How many do we have left?
I am not sure. Let's see. I could just run through these.
We have 7 more minutes. Okay,
Well, there's a couple that we're gonna skip.
okey doke, just keep going.
Okay, so type 13, distributor transport only, and I think it might be similar to self-transport, but all right, type 13, I'll leave it to you guys.
Okay, so again, we're recommending, you can see, adding in a lot of the cultivation zones under a minor use permit. And this is, again, this is that permit that would allow a licensed entity to transport to a distro themselves. And from there, the testing lab would pick it up. And then this would be a modification or an add-on, whatever language we want to determine, as a zoning permit in those that already have a licensed operation. I think what's important to note on this one is that this is a transport only. So they're picking up at a licensed entity and taking it through the system to other licensed entities. There's no storage on site for this one.
Do we want to make the same amendment of the zoning permit being a modification to an existing use permit?
Yes.
Okay,
And add in the existing base zones too.
plus existing base zones. So just so we're clear, by adding those existing base zones, we would be recommending that the major use permit go to a minor use permit or a modification of an existing use permit. Is that correct? Is that our understanding? Okay, because that's what we just said for the last one too, by adding that in. All right, any questions of the task force?
Okay. Okay, so I guess what I thought with the language of adding the base zoning districts into the recommendation, is that that would be only applicable to the add-on, not to a standalone, unless you're gonna change that too. Right, so my concern was that for people who already have other license types in the base zones that are approved for major use permits, if you don't include them under the add-on as a licensed operation, then they have to apply for a separate major use permit. So they need to be included for the add-on license, but not necessarily for the minor use permit as a standalone permit application, which is what Angela was saying, that it didn't make sense to her to have the cultivation zones be minor use and the more commercial zones be major use.
Well, let's take a look at the distributor transport only. If I envision that as an actual permit, like somebody's doing it, what do I have more than a car and a garage? Because I don't do any storage.
You don't even have, you don't have a garage.
Yeah.
No.
Right, I just got a van or a truck.
Yeah, so you could be, well, this isn't a good example, because retail can distribute. No, retail can deliver. So you could be a
Right.
retailer and want to get this.
But you can't, because this isn't delivered to the public, this is delivery from
between
licensee to
licensed,
licensee.
Right, but would you
It is.
deliver between your entities or you wouldn't need to? I'm trying to think of a use case that addresses.
Yeah, and
this.
I'm trying to think of.
So I don't, okay, I think that for the previous license type 11, it may be applicable to have a major use permit. I don't think that for this license type, it's applicable to have any of them be under a major use permit. So it would make sense to add the base zones to the current recommendations for this license type. But for license type 11, there could be discussion on denoting from a major use to a minor use.
So for license type 13, you're suggesting that all of the use permits for standalone operations could be minor use permits and not major.
It could be, because you're just transporting.
Yeah,
But for license type 11, you could require a major use permit for any new.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be.
Makes a lot of sense.
Wait, okay, hold on. Let's go back. Right, so we're gonna
We're
pause
making a
on,
completely different recommendation. Well, no, it's the same recommendation I made, it was just misinterpreted.
going back to let's make sure we got clarity. So the vote was,
Go back a slide.
the vote then, if we understand it, and Nara and Jen, I'll look to you for confirmation because you made the motion on the second, is that it would be if it's a new standalone permit application, it would be a minor use permit in APZ A, TPZ, RL, RR, SR. It would continue to be a major use permit in C3, M1, M2, and PDC. But then but if anybody wanted to do a modification to an existing use permit, be it either the major use permit or whatever else is existing, then it would be a modification to the use permit.
Correct.
Oh, that's what I did.
We're all
That's
nodding.
the interpretation.
Okay, good. So we're not, what I just shot out there was not accurate, that the major use permit would reduce to minor.
Correct.
Got it.
In type
In
11.
type 11.
Different.
Only in 11.
Yeah.
So now we're good. We're clear on that one. Then we're going back to 13. And I don't have a motion.
The task force could, well, that's actually zoning, so you probably could reduce that license type from major to minor at this
Sure we
meeting.
We could.
We can make a recommendation on that.
Okay.
Okay, so
So the task force could recommend to reduce this license type to minor use for all new standalone permit applications and leave the rest of the recommendation the same.
Mhm.
And that
So
would
they
bring
want-
everything-
That would bring everything into alignment.
Everybody want to make a motion?
I can attempt. I would like a motion to reduce base zones C2, C3, M1, M2, and PDC to a minor use permit. In addition to that,
Sorry to interrupt. We do have a public comment.
Whoops, sorry. Okay. Hold that.
Wait,
You wanna
public
make
comment
a
before
motion?
the motion? Isn't the public comment on the motion?
The public comment. should-
Hello.
For the motion. Hey,
Hello,
Mark.
Margot.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question. So with a zoning permit, are neighbors notified? And what kind of review process is involved for a zoning permit?
Great
Thank-
question, Margot. So a zoning permit is notified the same way a major use permit is, or no, sorry. Zoning permit is not noticed. It's a ministerial, it's a set of guidelines or regulations. And so long as it conforms, so long as the project conforms to those, then it's just over the counter. However, this one is not asking for a zoning permit. We at the very beginning, we recognize that we're changing that word from zoning permit to modification of existing use permit, which would then include public notification for property owners within either 350 feet to 700 feet from the project site, depending on the size of the project site. So it's most likely 700 since we got big sites. Well, either way. And then it's also in the newspaper and yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Myra.
Sure. Okay, so if we're getting back to the motion that Jennifer was right in the middle of, let me reiterate and then you keep going, right? It was to reduce the requirement of permit from major to minor in the C2, C3, M1, M2, PDC zones. And
add in the minor use permit category, zones APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR, so long as it's a standalone permit. Additionally, as an add-on to a licensed, existing licensed operation, a zoning permit could be issued in APZ. A modification could be issued in APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR.
I'll second that.
roll call, please.
Okay. William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper?
You still need to add the other base zoning districts to the mod portion, if you want the people in those districts to be able to make mods. To use this list.
Correct.
Good point.
So do I amend my motion?
I'm sorry, that's.
It's okay.
Thank
it's
you.
just- That's just a lot of words.
The folks in those districts.
So amend or should I just start over?
Because this is different than the last one, since you're actually reducing that.
Please start over.
Okay.
That was,
So,
Only for the modification part of it. We got the minor use permit
Okay.
part down.
so in addition, a zoning permit could be issued to an existing, a modification could be issued to an existing licensed operation in base zones C2, C3, M1, M2, and PDC, as well as APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR.
Still second.
Andrew, would you please do the roll call vote again?
Okay, William Weiss,
yes.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Del Baca.
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
No changes.
All right.
Self distribution only.
Also, just so people know, when we have approved use permits and we've had people ask to add distributor transport only self, we're just taking it in, making a note in the file. We're not even going through the whole process because it's no environmental impact. It's just adding an option for that person on what they're already doing. So, okay, Skip, thanks. Oh, we're 5 minutes over. How many do we have left?
Let's see, we've got processor license, type 8 testing lab, type 12 micro business, type 9 delivery retail only.
And then all the retail.
So we've got 4.
Type 10 consumption. all that.
Since we're doing retail next week again, should we let's just not do those? And if everybody can hang in, we've got like 3 more.
We might want to add micro because micro is one of the license types that allows for on-site consumption.
Let's talk, okay, let's add that next week. Okay, so, okay, where are we? Processor?
Processor license.
Good. I like that strikeout that you did, Andrew. Thank you, because there was one that I remember we took out.
That was it, the fire districts.
Task force has approved our recommendation of minor use, or no, of allowing C3, M1, M2, MP for processor license.
Correct.
Okay, and so before us today is taking those in as a minor use permit. But not changing the existing major use permit in APZA, TPZ, RL. Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right, any questions from the task force? Seeing none, okay, wait, we got Will.
Are there any other, is there anything missing from the slide that was omitted? Is there something else that was minor use before?
Do we want to lower the base zones here to a minor use permit?
No, because processing shouldn't be minor in a cultivation area.
Okay.
Okay. And any questions in the Zoom room?
I moved
Nope.
to.
No hands in the Zoom room.
Okay, just jump on that, Rebecca, go.
I move to accept the recommendation to approve the cannabis processor license as a minor use permit in zone C3, M1, M2, and MP. Bill West seconds it.
Well, I need some sort of gesticulation.
I
Oh,
do.
he said
Okay,
that.
good. All right, good. It's one of those silly democratic things. Okay, cool. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Nara Del Baca.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Type 8 cannabis testing labs, no recommendation changes. So, or no recommended changes, sorry. Type 12 micro business. I think this is the last one.
We were gonna pause here, Andrew, and take this up next week because it also includes potential retail, which could include potential consumption.
It's true.
But
Okay.
Because this is really just a paper license, they're gonna go through that process anyway. So if they're approved for whatever they're approved for, then they can get the micro business. So I don't really see a reason for
Yeah,
delaying
because this
this.
isn't. the
Because it relies on the
actual-
base zoning for that, then license. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, good point.
Okay, so we, our recommendation was to allow micro businesses in C2, C3, M1, M2, MP. And the recommendation is to take that in as a minor use permit, but no change to APZA, TPZ, RL, and RR where a major use permit is required. Any questions from the task force? Anything in the Zoom?
No hands in the Zoom room.
We'll bring it back to the task force.
I make a motion that we approve the recommendation of a minor use permit for type 12 micro business in zones C2, C3, M1, M2, and MP.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Andrew, would you please do roll call?
William Weiss,
Aye.
Jan Coppinger,
Aye.
Catherine Vanderwall.
Aye.
Rebecca Harper,
Aye.
Jennifer Smith,
Aye.
Narada Baka.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Then we get back to retail, which we're gonna pick up next week.
Next week.
And that's where we're at. I don't think there's any significant updates unless Maria, you have something.
No, but we do have public comments, so we'll move on to that. We got Sarah.
On CDD updates, this is Sarah Bodner speaking. I was curious about the timeline for the temporary drying structures ordinance going back before the Board of Supervisors.
Well, that ordinance is going to need environmental review. My plan was to get through the last of the applications, trying to make the season to get to planning commission, which we have our last, well, not really our last, but one of the last planning commissions to make it coming up this Thursday. The goal that we have is to complete the environmental review through the month of July so that we can circulate it July to August and have it ready to start getting on the agenda for Board of Supervisors early September. It's kind of a tight deadline, but that's what we're looking at.
It is massively tight, and on behalf of every cultivator in this county, I'm like, my blood pressure is through the roof right now. People are farming and they don't know where they're gonna dry their crops. We've been asking for this for 3 years, and it's, nobody would be expected to do business like this.
And there are
Unbearable.
inspections happening right now where inspectors are asking people about where they're drying and how they're drying, and farmers don't know how to answer.
Puts us in an incredibly compromised position.
Unfortunately, we can't bypass CEQA.
No, I get it,
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just talking brass tacks details. Early September, a draft before the board, we know what that could mean.
Mhm.
It can mean many readings and whatnot, and people are gonna be harvesting.
Feel free to communicate your position to the Board of Supervisors.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as we get through CEQA, we're gonna do the staff report and get it before the back to the board. I think we're skipping planning commission. I don't know that we can't, and we might have to go to planning commission.
With the CEQA review?
Yeah. Because the board delegates usually to CEQA, however, they requested that it come back before us. So let me take a look at that. We might skip planning commission if we can't go to the board.
I have an unrelated request slash inquiry.
Yes, ma'am.
Some of these recommendations were a little bit complicated, and as we know, sometimes complicated recommendations have a hard time as they move on from this room. So would it be possible to see these recommendations slash presentations before they are given to planning and BOS? Just so we can
Absolutely.
make sure
We will make sure they are clear in the minutes because they don't exist until you guys approve the minutes.
okay.
Like you're taking action today, but you're gonna confirm that action by approving the minutes. So I'll work with Ruby to make sure, and Andrea will all
And
work
then,
together.
yeah, just as they come up, as they're agendized for planning commission and board of supervisors, maybe at the meeting prior to that, we can kind of review it and make sure we're like,
I think that's a great idea. Before we start taking stuff to planning commission and board, maybe we'll add a standing item on our agenda for updates.
I think that would be a great idea.
Good. I
What
like
is
that
the
too.
next meeting date?
I have a 3 o'clock appointment.
Okay.
so I gotta run.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.
We kept saying next week, but we don't meet next week, right?
Correct.
Oh, so we're back on our normal one, right? So 2 weeks.
2 weeks from today.
Yes, we should have. it.
Andrew,
That's July 3rd.
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling up the calendar for everyone.
aren't we closed on July
No.
3rd? We're
No.
open.
Open, yeah,
Close
it's
on the
really.
fourth.
So on the calendar.
We have Monday, July 10th. That's our next meeting.
Yeah, so that's.
July 10th.
Oh.
Good.
Yeah, probably because we have people, assume people would be gone.
I'm gonna be gone.
So.
Okay, good. So July 10th. Now let's get back to public comment.
Okay, we have one hand in the Zoom room.
Go ahead, Angela.
You, so we didn't get to the temporary cannabis events, but since we're gonna be talking about it next week, maybe you guys can answer a question so I don't have to email. Is there, I know there's ordinance 2947 that is a special winery event ordinance. Is there something similar to that for cannabis, or will that be addressed in when we discuss the zoning, or yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna work.
We'll get to it next week, but currently there is no pathway or avenue for a cannabis event in the county.
Okay, yeah, but will there be like parameters that have to be followed? Because like the ordinance 2947 is pretty specific on like wineries that have amplified outdoor events, non-promo events, promo events. So is there gonna be something similar to that that we're looking at before we decide on zoning?
Yeah, my understanding is that's one of the reasons why they're not allowed, because we don't have that stuff in place, but perhaps this ordinance could be a good guideline to structure a cannabis event ordinance or permit on.
And that's what we're proposing, Angela. We had talked about it a little bit last week, and we'll talk about it at the next meeting, that we have an ordinance around special events specifically for cannabis that has a checklist, like you have to go through, if you're a nonprofit, you know, go get your ABCs, sign off, get the sheriff sign up, all that stuff. That kind of process, but specific to a cannabis event and what kind of agencies would need to sign off on it. So it'd be a whole new thing because it doesn't exist yet.
Okay, wonderful. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Yeah, there's only one location in the county that's approved cannabis temporary events, and that's the fair. But the fair is still working with the city of Lakeport on figuring out what that looks like. So there's not ability to quite do that yet. Cool. I think outside.
Okay, having no further actions or items, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks very much.